in the U.S. I was from, and I asked him if he'd been to the U.S. He said yes, he'd been to Florida and he'd been to Texas. And I said, did you like it? And he said, you have ice cream. I said, yeah, we have ice cream in the U.S. He says, I love ice cream. I said, I love ice cream too. He says, do you have ice cream on the ship? I said, we do. Would you like some? And he said, see. So I ran up to deck 9 and I got an ice cream cone, and it's like 94 degrees, so it's melting. I'm frantically running down the steps. I've got napkins all over me. And I handed him the ice cream cone, and he handed me 3 bollos that his wife had made for lunch that day. And he had his ice cream cone, and I ate bollos, and we talked about each other's kids and grandkids and all those kinds of things. We probably violated like 17 international laws that day. But the workers on the canal are fascinated by cruise ships. Personally, please don't be offended by what I'm about to say. I think they're looking for naked ladies up on the deck. I don't know. They seem really fascinated by us, but they watch us very closely, and they're very friendly. They will be waving at you, and they'll yell at you. If you yell at them, you can have conversations with them, and all of that. So I love going through on deck 3 and seeing the mechanisms and things. But again, you can see how close in everything is here. These are the gates, and this is the way gates should operate. Gates should open, not slide. Yes? Because the folks on the Splendor got cheated because their gates slid and all that. All right. So when we get in, something to be aware of, the sidewalls, and by the sidewalls we're talking about this wall here and the wall that would be over here. They're about 45 to 55 feet thick at the base, depending on which lock you're in. The center wall here is 60 feet thick. So this is 60 feet from the side of the ship to the side of our ship. Okay, so that's how close everything is. And then in these walls, there are 3 galleries. The upper gallery is an access gallery that gives individuals access to some of the mechanical equipment that operates the gates and those things. The center gallery has electrical wiring in it. The bottom gallery actually has the channels that bring the water in. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then the gates range anywhere from 47 to 82 feet tall. And the reason they have that range is because on the Pacific side, you have those crazy coastal tides. If you've ever been to Alaska on a ship, you know how you got off on level 1 and you came back and you're getting on deck 6 or something, and it's still straight across because of the coastal tides that go up and down so far. You have to have the taller walls on the Pacific side on the Miraflores locks to be able to control that. So how the lock system works is there's a series of culverts, as I said, in each lock, those 3 culverts. And in the bottom culvert, you actually have a narrowing that happens when it's coming from the lake to the ocean. The culverts start at 22 feet in diameter, and then they shrink down to 18 feet in diameter. Everything that happens in the canal is gravity-fed. There are no pumps behind that water that's forcing that water out into the chamber. That's all done by gravity, by narrowing those culverts. That forces it, gives that pressure, that back pressure, if you will, to force the water out. There's 14 cross culverts in each chamber, 7 on either side, and that's where the water is coming in from. And then each of those culverts has 5 openings. So basically you have 35 openings. If you could get down under the water to see them, you have 35 openings on either side of each chamber. So we have 3 chambers going in, we have 3 chambers coming out on the other side. And they can move this water by gravity and fill a chamber in 8 minutes. And one of the things you'll want to see is to be able to look down and see the tremendous volume of the water that's coming in. You can see this really bubbling up and see the force that's coming in to be able to raise the ship up those 85 feet step by step as we're going through each lock. So make sure that you see that and see what's going on. And again, that's what's necessary to raise us from sea level to the level of Gatun Lake and then back down on the other side. And so you'll be able to see that as we're in. You'll see it down here in the, you'll see it especially bubbling in the front. Down on the side, it's hard to see because we're so close to the wall, you can't really see much. Best for you to see the water bubbling is either going to be in the front or in the very back of the ship, and look down and you'll be able to see it as you're coming in. And again, this is just to give you an idea of how close we are on either side. Now, I'll talk about these again, but I want you to just notice these trains. On a Spirit-class ship, we get 4 of these trains. They're called mules. They're powered by electricity. And these are not necessarily to propel us through. What these are there for is to keep us centered in the canal. Panama Canal is the only place on Earth where when the pilot comes on board the ship, the pilot legally takes responsibility for the ship. In any other port that we go into, you've seen the pilot ships and you see them. Doesn't that look like fun? Wouldn't you just like to try that someday? Just like jump onto the pilot ship while we're moving at like 18 knots. I think it looks like fun. But when the pilot comes on, in most ports, they serve in an advisory capacity. They know the terrain. They know where the obstacles are. They know how things have shifted. So they're guiding the captain and recommending the best course. In the Panama Canal, the pilot actually takes over the ship and is in charge. Because this is a very complex operation, because the pilot is actually radioing instructions to the mule drivers and saying, let out line, take up line, to keep us centered in the canal. Now, they don't really like cruise ships in the new locks because we have a lot of sail mast on the side. We're very tall and there's a lot of surface area. It's very windy down in the Panama Canal. And so that wind is constantly blowing against the ship. And in the new locks, you have a tug in the front and you have a tug in the back, and then the ship is self-propelled itself. And it's trying to stay centered in the locks, and it's a very challenging operation. In the old locks, you have the mules to actually lock you in place and keep you centered. So the experienced pilot is really more about keeping you centered, and he knows how to read the winds and to play out the lines and take up the lines. Interesting, in February, I was on the Pride, and I got an invitation to ride through on the bridge. That was cool, because it was air-conditioned. I was up there, and I was talking with the lecturer, and I was up there, and the head of security was up there, the entertainment director, just a couple of staff members that had been invited up to be on the bridge, and we hit the side of the canal. Just a little bump. And the barometric pressure in the bridge changed instantly. And the staff captain came up and said, excuse me, invited guests, could I ask you just to step out of the bridge for just a moment, please? The captain needs to have a little discussion. And when we got to Limon the next morning, they were already out painting it and fixing it and doing all those kinds of things. So, the captain is obviously very protective of the ship. It's a very nerve-wracking thing to take this multi-million-dollar vessel that you are responsible for and give it to someone else. But this is such a highly specialized skill to be able to take it through the canal, and that's why the pilots come on and they take charge of it at that time. So let's talk just a little bit about what the journey is going to look like. We're going to enter down here on the Pacific side. We're going to come in by Panama City. You'll be able to see the city. Will be in full view. You'll be able to get some great shots of the city. It'll be the sunlight will be coming toward us, obviously, in the morning, and coming in from the east. And so that's over here. Be lighting the city this way. And so we will come in. The first thing that we will see is right here, and that's the Bridge of the Americas. We should be there sometime around 6:15 in the morning. The pilots will get on the ship. We'll get individuals that have come on to help handle the guidance. Guidelines, I'll tell you, that's a fascinating process to watch as well. We will come through here. We'll hit the Miraflores locks. Adam gave you the schedule already, and I'll give it to you again in the end. At the Miraflores locks, we go through 2 chambers. On the Pacific end, you have 2 chambers, and that's because of the coastal tides. They just built 2 chambers, and then we will sail just a little bit farther, and then we have the 3rd lock on the Pacific end. That's in the Pedro Miguel locks, and that's just a single lock. And each time, we will have to tie off, be attached to the mules, and then brought through and then released so that we can sail on. From there, we come through the Culebra Cut. We come underneath the Centennial Bridge, which is absolutely stunning, and I'm very excited about that. We come through the Culebra Cut. You'll see we go through some very sharp turns that we come through to navigate through. This is the first lake that was created back here off the Chagres River. Here's the Madden Dam. We won't be over there, but that's a water supply that supplies water here. You can see the path of the Chagres River and where it originally went through here. Eventually, we come out into Gatun Lake. The dam is right here that I showed you the pictures of, and here are the Gatun locks that will take us then out into the Atlantic. And when we get there, all 3 chambers are all together in one thing. So we tie off once, we go all 3 chambers, and that takes about an hour and a half to get through. The new locks are right here. So here's the old locks. Here's the new locks. Same thing down here when they're near the Flores locks and the Pedro Miguel locks. They're right adjacent to each other. You'll be able to see them off to the distance. And sometimes you can actually, if there's a ship in there, you'll see the ship going up and down with us kind of through the trees and things like that. As I mentioned earlier, the canal was significantly widened in 2002 from a maximum of 500 feet to now a maximum of 630 feet in the straight sections, and they really widened out the curves so that 2 ships could pass through. Prior to that time, from here to here, you could only have a ship going one direction, and so that shaved about 4 hours off the trip going through the locks. So as I mentioned, this is the first thing we'll be looking for is the Bridge of the Americas. This is the oldest bridge in the Panama Canal. This is the first bridge to connect North America and South America. There are still some swing bridges on the Pacific side. You'll still see some traffic going through, but not nearly as much because you have the Bridge of the Americas and you have Centennial Bridge that carries most of the traffic over. It's not like on the Atlantic side where there is no bridge. And this is the Splendor going underneath of the bridge last week. These are the Miraflores locks. As I mentioned, there's only 2 chambers in these. You can see a ship here down below, and it's still at sea level, and you can see how this ship has been raised up to the level of the river, and so you can see the difference in their height, and you'll be able to observe that as we're going through. These are some old swinging bridge left over from the days before the Bridge of the Americas. They really don't use these swinging bridges anymore unless there's construction or there's an incident on the Bridge of the Americas, then they can open these bridges up and use them as needed. Then we go through the Pedro Miguel locks. As I said, there's only 1 chamber here, and you can see all the ships here that have already gone ahead, that have gone through the Pedro Miguel locks and on their way to the Culebra Cut. We go under the Centennial Bridge. Isn't that a beautiful piece of architecture? And it's just stunning. And I'm glad we're going through it during the day because the canal at night is really kind of boring. But this is the one thing I wish I could see at night is to see that bridge lit up. I've seen pictures and it looks absolutely stunning. After the Centennial Bridge, we go into the actual Culebra Cut. Here's where you can see the grooves in the line. That was where the tallest section was right there. And then out into Gatun Lake and out into Gatun Locks. Here's the new locks, the Agua Flora locks. Here's Gatun Locks right here. Here's the dam right here again. And we'll be coming from this direction, approaching in the west lane of the Gatun locks. And then this is the new bridge that's being constructed. I took this picture, Radu took this picture. This was in January. I was just there in December. This bridge is scheduled to be open in March. Ain't gonna happen. Anybody that tries to use it in March, and you'll be able to see this. And actually, when I was just through here in December on the Paradise, and there were workers, and this span had been completed. This span has not still been completed. This was filled in, but there were workers up here, and their feet were dangling over, and they were waving at us as we went underneath the bridge, and that was a lot of fun. All right, I had this picture, again, one of Radu's pictures, to show you on the Atlantic side. Right here is the Agua Clara locks, the new locks. Here's the Gatun locks. This little piece of water right here is the original French Cut. And so if you want to see that, after we come through the locks on the Atlantic side, the last set of locks, get to the back of the ship and look off to your right, and you'll be able to see this little river that's going back in. That's all the farther that they got. Okay, and that was their attempt to build the sea level canal. They did a little bit of cutting down of the Culebra Cut, and that was all the digging that they did, and that's as far as they got. And for that, 28,000 people died. Just for that right there. And so, we're fortunate to have the technology that we have now that allows us to do these kinds of things, control the disease. But I hope as you go through, you have a sense of the human cost that was really engaged in providing this. It's a commercially viable thing. For us, it's a vacation opportunity. And you think that the people who gave their lives probably never dreamed of vacationers going through something like this. Again, to be part of that 0.031% of the population of the world, we are indeed very, very fortunate. Let's talk about classification of ships, because this is important when we're thinking about who can go through which canal. We are a Panamax ship, which means we can fit through the old canal. And so a Panamax ship, maximum tonnage is 52,500, maximum length of 950. Now cruise ships can be longer because we tend to have that bow that sticks out. Okay, so we can be longer than a cargo ship tends to be flat in the front and flat in the back, and so that gives us a little more space. Maximum beam or width of 106 feet, maximum height of 190 feet, maximum draft of 50 feet. That's a Panamax ship. Neo-Panamax ships, which the Splendor is a Neo-Panamax ship. Those folks got cheated. Just tell all your friends, after you've been through the canal, just all your Splendor friends, just say, yeah, I don't know why you wasted your money. These are the ships can fit through there. Maximum tonnage of 120,000, maximum length of 1,201 feet, maximum beam or width of 161 feet, maximum draft of 50 feet, same maximum height of 190 feet. Why is it the same for each lock? Because the height's controlled by the bridges. Okay, you have to be able to fit under the Bridge of the Americas, and 190 feet is the maximum that you can get. Post-Panamax ships will fit through neither canal, and so they have to still go all the way around the tip of South America to be able to get from the Atlantic to the Pacific or vice versa. Now, interestingly enough, the Chinese have started digging a canal in Nicaragua, which is really where the canal should have been dug in the first place. Had we gone to Nicaragua, it would have been much easier. It would have been much simpler. Would have been way less costly had we dug the canal through Nicaragua. The Chinese have announced their plans to do that. They have broken ground, and then everything stopped. There's a bunch of equipment lying around in Nicaragua. No one seems to know what's going on, but they claim that it will be the largest canal and that post-Panamax ships will actually be able to fit through it. So we'll see if we see that in our lifetime or not going through there. Now, to give you a sense of context, the Miracle is 963 feet long. Okay, so we're right there. Our beam is 105.7 feet. Our height's 115 feet, so we're going to be fine going underneath the bridges, 6 inches, and our draft is only 25.5 feet. So we've got plenty of bottom space. We're not going to hit bottom going through the canal. But this gives you that sense of just how close we are going to be to the walls. It really is extraordinary. You know, you can maybe start to picture it in your mind, but until you actually physically see it, it is really an amazing kind of thing to see that, just how close we are and how much we fill up each chamber. So here's some interesting trivia. The very first ship to go all the way through the canal was the SS Ancon, happened on August 15th, 1914. So the canal is now a little over 103 years old. They had a great centennial celebration, and I've talked to some people who have been on some cruise ships during that 100-year celebration and talked about how there was, you know, people cheering for them at the visitor centers and things like that as they went through. The longest ship to ever go through was the San Juan Prospector at 973 feet. They actually had to only partially close the locks. It was an interesting experiment to get it to go through, but they made it work. It took a long time. It took almost 10 hours just to get through each set of locks. The widest ships to ever go through were the 4 Iowa-class battleships. And they have less than 6 inches of margin between the ship and the walls of the locks. You want to be real careful, okay? And the fastest sailing of the canal, this was kind of a publicity stunt back in the 1960s. The U.S. Navy hydrofoil Pegasus, they actually stopped all the traffic and just opened up the canal that day for the Pegasus to go through. Did what's normally had been a 12-hour journey, did it in 2 hours and 41 minutes because it was able to just go and didn't have to wait for other ships. Sailing in the Panama Canal, now we get an advantage because they give priority to cruise ships because they want to get us in, they want to get us out, because this is a working operation. They try to do this during an 8.5-hour day so that we can see the entire process in one day. Cargo ships, they sometimes get on in Gatun Lake and they have to wait their turn. They're assigned a number, and boy, you had better be ready to go when it is your turn to go, because if you miss your turn, you could be sitting out there for a couple of days before they slot you back into the schedule. They do give priority to the cruise ships so that they can get us through in one day because of the nature of the schedule, and because, you know, if a cargo ship gets backed up, like the 7 guys working on board are going to be really unhappy. If we get backed up and miss the next port, they're going to get 1,000 letters, 2,000 letters from us, so they don't want that. All right, so here we are in the approach. This is the Gatun Locks, and I want to talk about this swinging bridge right here. You can see a fire truck actually driving across this. And this is a single-lane bridge. Traffic only goes one way or the other. Here are those roads I talked about where you can see the cars speeding down, and even as we're coming this way through these locks, you'll be able to see those cars trying to make it. We have to tie off to these trains, these mules, and when they do it, this is one of the things you want to watch. You'll get 3 opportunities to see this. So if you miss this the first time, you have 2 more. At each point as we're entering locks, there's a rowboat. It's got 2 guys in it. And they're going to physically row their boat out to the ship. Now, when the pilot gets on the ship, he's going to bring a whole crew of individuals with him that are going to be the line handlers. And they're going to be stationed in the front and the back of the ship. And they're going to have the lines from the ship that they're going to toss out to the guys in the rowboat. And they literally row their boat all the way out to the ship. And so you'll be able to watch this if you're up front and looking down. Really here, if you're in the very front, you won't be able to see this. You need to be back a little ways, kind of looking over the side up top, and you'll be able to see them throwing out the guy lines. You'll see them grab those lines, and they will row them over here, and then they will get attached to the mules, and that's how we attach up to be able to going through. And they have to do that 3 times, 1 for each set of the locks that we go through, and that's a fascinating thing to watch. And then these are the trains themselves. As I mentioned, they're electric powered. The train tracks are a little narrower gauge. There's actually a gear track in between the tracks that you'll see. These have gears on the bottom that hold on to those gears because they have to go up pretty steep inclines as we're going through to get up to the next level or down to the next level. So those gears are what keep them from slipping up and down. And again, this is not propelling us forward. Our engines are propelling us forward, but these are keeping us centered as we go. And here's that car carrier that I was telling you about and how close it is when it's 60 feet away. Here's the water coming into the chamber, so you can see some of the stirring. And again, all this water is coming from this chamber into this chamber. The way the doors are designed is that they will not open until this chamber is at the same level as this chamber. So it's the back pressure from the taller chamber that actually forces those doors closed. These doors are hollow. They're designed to take water into them as the chamber is filling, and that gives them more stability. And then when that chamber is emptied out, the doors are also hollowed out so that they can open up and you don't have those weight issues. And they will not open until these are at the same level, and then that's when they open and we're able to go through. And it's a very majestic kind of thing. And here's a worker actually out on the chamber, and I think it was one of the cruises, maybe one of the Pride cruises, we actually had photographers, and they were allowed to go out here and take pictures, and they were running around from the photo department. They were pretty geeked about all that. So again, just something to watch as we're going through. And this just gives you an overhead view of the locks. On the inside edge, you do have a double set of doors. Those are there mostly for pressure reasons, to just give you an extra safety measure. They don't have to use both doors. They can just use the one, it's fine, but they will use both doors when the ships are short enough to be able to get in there. And you will see as we go through, about halfway through, there is another set of doors in each chamber. They used to use those for smaller vessels that they didn't need the whole thing to try to conserve water. They rarely use those any longer. Now, if they have smaller vessels, they'll put multiple vessels in at the same time. And the last 2 times I've been through, I've actually seen sailboats that have strapped together 3 across, and they'll go into the chamber with a cargo ship. And they actually, they throw lines up, and they have guys that walk along with them while they're going through. And it's up to them to kind of keep everything centered by hand as they're going through the locks. Canal itself is 48 miles long. We're going to do that journey in about 8 miles. To correspond with that, it's an 8,000-mile journey around Cape Horn. It's an extra 71 days of buffet, so I mean, there's that. It takes us about 8 to 15 hours to pass through the canal. About half that time for cargo vessels is spent waiting due to traffic. We're going to do it in just a little over 8 hours. Average ship time is about 8 to 12 hours. Again, it takes about 20 days around. If you're going 16 knots, don't stop. That's how long it takes to get around. So you think about the fuel consumption that you save and all those kinds of things, as well as the time that you save in going through. Now, the fee to travel through for cargo ships is based on tonnage. For passenger ships, it's based